Hey guys, and welcome back to the Hobby Dude 007 channel. Been trying to catch up on a number of videos from some of the other content creators, things I'm behind on. Always learn something new. And man, I'm discovering new channels every day. Some new, some of them are a little older, but some great stuff out there. So be sure to check around. You'll find some great stuff. Anyway, while watching some of these, I ran across a couple that made me start thinking about something. Number one, Jason at Blue Ox Model Shop had mentioned that he wanted to share his RC rock crawlers. And he was talking about other hobbies that we have besides model cars. And then Henry Robbs with Mid-Century Models did one that showed his museum of his G.I. Joe and Lunchbox collection. And there's some really cool stuff there too. Well, I've got a couple extra hobbies too, and I want to keep it automotive, but I'll tell you about some of mine as well, so stick around. I have several hobbies myself. Over the years, I've collected some military memorabilia, as well as some police patches. I got quite an extensive patch collection and badge collection from around not just the U.S. but around the world. But I also collect and restore certain firearms. This flintlock, for example, is one that I've show every now and then. And last time I showed this, someone made a wise crack about, so is that the same musket that you carried during the Revolutionary War? Which I got to admit, that was pretty good. But this one's a restoration and a replica, so that one, no, I didn't carry that one. That one's in another box. But anyway, I wanted to stick with the automotive end of it, so I'm going to turn the camera around. I'm going to show you some old pictures of my RC cars, and some that I still play with on occasion. But there's some fun stuff out there too. So I got the racing bug, and so let me share that with you. All right, let me turn the camera around. My first RC car was a Traxxas T-Max, and the T-Max was an awesome monster truck. The original version came with a 2.5 engine, 2-speed transmission, electric start, and had reverse. And for a nitro car, I don't know of any other ones that had reverse at that time. But a really cool car. And this thing, as you can see without the body on, you can see your air filter, all of that stuff there. It's just a fun little truck. And the thing with nitro you had to get used to is with humidity, moisture in the air, because of the nitro fuel, you had to kind of tweak and tune a little bit. But it wasn't that hard to learn, and I had a lot of fun with this thing. Well, eventually sold that and moved on to the Losi 1/8 scale buggy. And this thing was a beast. Had a Dynamite .21 engine. These things are raced all over the country in different divisions. You can go to YouTube and pull those up in the buggy divisions, and they are a lot of fun. But I didn't get the racing bug quite yet. After the Losi, I moved on to back to Traxxas and to the Revo. And as you can see with in this picture, this thing had a wide stance, totally different type of suspension for a monster truck. When the 3.3 engine came out, I did an engine swap on it. Now this particular one now, it belongs to my daughter, but I'm going to have to put a new piston and sleeve in it because I have about worn this thing slap out. Got aftermarket extra wide tires on it and all of that stuff. But just absolutely a blast to drive. A lot of fun. And as you can see by that wide footprint there. But one of the reasons I got away from the nitro cars was the cost of fuel. And I ran Blue Thunder sport and racing fuel, depending on where I was running and what car I was running. But even today, and it didn't matter what the brand is, I just liked Blue Thunder. But with any of it, Wildcat, Blue Thunder, back then it was like $16 a gallon, and a gallon would last you a while. Today, that same fuel is between $35 and $45 a gallon, and I kind of got away with it, or away from it. But the next thing was to move on up to the electric cars. Now, there was a time that it took forever to charge the batteries and they didn't last that long. Well, today with the new LiPo batteries, as well as the brushless motor systems, and by the way, the new electric brushless cars are so much faster than the nitro. They just keep winding. Those things are just terrible fast. But these things were a lot of fun, and the next thing up was the Traxxas Summit that you're looking at here. And they make this in a mini and a full size like the Revo. And brushless system or the 12-turn motor, which for a brushed motor was pretty quick, with the extra long life batteries and stuff you can get for them nowadays. But where I got the racing bug was in late 2008 or early 2009. Losi came out with the mini dirt late model. Now this thing got my attention, and it got the attention of a lot of people because the hobby shop I was going to at that time, Great Escape, I think the Spartanburg store had sold upward 100 of these things, and people it's a dirt late model, and with the success of those, down the road came the sprint car, and isn't that cool? I did buy a sprint car, but I didn't race it. But because of the popularity of these things, one of the guys in our area that drove, or still drives as far as I know, Mike Willard, opened a track at his house to accommodate some of the guys getting together and racing. So he built a dirt track, and there were 4 core guys that got out and just blistered it. And here's some pictures that I took, action shots from around the track there. And this is where it started to get me a little bit, and eventually a lot. But this was turned into something that I got out of model building for several years. As if you remember my interview with Lucas C. a year or so ago, I said that I walked away to go racing for a while. Well, this was what I ended up doing. Well, anyway, here's the 4 guys that originally started the racetracks in our area. This is, it was Lake Blaylock Speedway, and these are the Blaylock Bump Drafters. And this picture was taken probably a year or 2 years later at Little Indy Speedway, and I'll get into that one here shortly too. But you're going to see in the pictures of my cars the sponsorship from Great Escape. And in the northern part of South Carolina, Great Escape was in business for 45 years. And they were a top-line bicycle shop, but they also had a full-line hobby shop. Trains, RC planes, helicopters, cars, drones, every kind of model and accessory. The old MSC products, this is where I discovered them, was at Great Escape. They had 3 locations in the upstate and 3 different counties, and 2 of those had full-line hobby shops. Like I said, there wasn't anything hobby-wise. You could get puzzles, rocketry, whatever you can think of, balsa, airplanes, parts, accessories, they carried it all. And then, after Lake Blaylock, they opened a speedway, as you see here, Great Escape Speedway. Now, this speedway was a little bit smaller, just a little smaller than Blaylock, but it had some wide straightaways, some really nicely banked turns. It was well kept. And there's pictures right before one of the night races. And as this started to grow, more racetracks started to pop up too. Here's one of the qualifying heats. Usually the qualifying heats had 8, sometimes 10 cars, depending on how many guys show up. And some of the guys, the lattice work you see on the left, that's the driver's stand that the guys stood in, the remote control drivers. Here's some of the cars out on the racetrack. And as you see the 43, yes, that is ours. Now, that car was not only sponsored by Great Escape, but what money they didn't put into it, I put into it, because these were my cars. And I'll actually show you some of my cars here shortly. But I painted up, McAllister Bodies put out about 5 or 6 different bodies for this chassis for the Losi, and there were several companies that also did aftermarket stuff. And you get a lot of action shots here. Now, in that I was new to this, I ran a rookie class later on, but one of the guys that worked in the bicycle shop, Dennis Green, was absolutely a top drawer RC car driver. Had been driving them for a long time, and I let him run the super late model class, and it was my car, and it was sponsored by Great Escape and me. And there you see Dennis. And by the way, that is Dennis in the 43 down there. And when they hit the finish line right here, we all had to run over to the computer. We had a transponder system, or transponders in the car, and the track had a transponder cable buried under the track, so it counted your laps. And he came away with the victory here. So we are tickled to death there. And this is the kind of pit area there during one of the Saturday afternoon races at Great Escape, and you see all the versatility and all of the goodies of these cars, different bodies. And I'll get into the explanation on some of these bodies here in a minute too. But you see the guys working on the cars. And in this picture, down toward the bottom, you see all that front suspension clip there. As modelers, we sometimes complain about the cost of model cars nowadays, and it has considerably gone up since I started in the hobby many years ago. But considering the amount of money I put into RC cars, oh boy. That front clip down there you're looking at that's not the stock parts for the car. That's all aluminum coilover shocks, oil-filled coilover shocks. All that aluminum work right there represents about $140, $150, and that's without the tires. So you could and still can tie up a lot of money in these things. And if you're going to be competitive, just like in real racing, if you're going to learn real quick, if you're going to be competitive and run up front, you have to have the best of equipment, best of engines, batteries, these things are, and by the way, these are all electric, of course. And I thought I'd share with you here some of the nifty paint jobs some of the guys came up with. And this Monte Carlo, I'll get into this a little bit later. McAllister came out with several bodies, and we started a whole class. The group of guys in the area started a class of Monte Carlo and Camaros. And that was the only thing you could run in that class, was either the Monte Carlo body or the Camaro body. And these are action shots at Great Escape Speedway that I took, and just some absolutely fun stuff. This body was one that one of the guys made and was just out experimenting with one afternoon. Bad looking little body though, really sharp. And a couple of the other guys in action. Monte Carlo. Now the 36 car, over time in the super late model class, I had 3 guys that ran my cars. Dennis Green, who I mentioned earlier, that was the bike mechanic, and Alan Foy, who was probably the best guy at setting up a car that I've ever known, and Brooks Lauder. Those 3 guys over time ran for me, drove in the super class, and I would put 2 cars in there at a time. And like I mentioned, I was running the rookie class at one time, and I've got something funny to show you about that here in a few minutes too. A lot of good shots here of the cars, and you can see the creativity of these bodies. And by the way, these bodies all come clear. They're clear like sand. They're very flexible. And you paint them reverse on the inside. But as you can see, there's some creative guys and some just beautiful paint work. And Mike Willard, that started the Speedway, that started it all up at Lake Blaylock Speedway, Mike also on Double Deuce decals. He does the vinyl decals for the real cars, excuse me, as well as for the RC cars. So you just give him the artwork you wanted or give him an idea and he'd go from there. Some other pictures from Great Escape Speedway. Fun stuff. Well, it springboarded from there to another speedway. But before I get to that, at Great Escape Speedway, as you can see here, we had a lot of success. Because there were so many different bodies, we tried different bodies in different classes, and some ran better than others as far as, I don't know if you want to use the word aerodynamic or just, they just handled better. So I painted up, I think I ended up having on display at Great Escape, which helped them sell bodies and stuff too. And naturally my cars are 43. Guess you didn't see that coming. But as you can see in Victory Lane here, we had some success at Great Escape Speedway. The all-white cars were among my favorites, and the solid petty blue cars. But Dennis, one of my drivers, loved this car, and he liked to run it about all the time. I'd let him kind of choose what bodies, and he'd switch them around. But the fluorescent yellow, the fluorescent red numbers, and the petty blue, he just loved that car. And he had a great deal of success with that car running for me, too. And then he also ran in the Monte Carlo class. And by the way, this is not something where you just take the body off of one and stick it on another. You had to have separate chassis, separate rules and regulations kind of applied to these different classes. Now the Camaro, that as I mentioned earlier, you had the Monte Carlo and Camaro class. Now this Monte Carlo, the Camaro, turned out to be a beautiful car, and it looked like it was going to be more aerodynamic than anything we ever ran. But we never could. Actually, we never raced this car. We practiced on 2 different speedways, and we just could not get it to hook up. The Monte Carlo, believe it or not, was much faster, handled much better as far as its times go. But the uniqueness of this cool little paint job on the Camaro was, if you remember the pictures, like here, of the first team I was on was that of Lonnie Perkle, and this is a percolator crew, and I think they said I was in that picture somewhere on the other side. I have no clue. I might have been doing something with a tire, but anyway, that was the first team I worked on. We had a Nova and the Camaro in that same paint scheme, and as you see on the B-pillar there, the little image is that of Darth Vader. That's what a lot of people nicknamed that car, because that was a winning car. And the next speedway up was an indoor track called Little Indy. Excuse me. Little Indy was owned by Bobby Bowe. Actually, it's still down there. Bobby had some health issues, some cancer, and I don't think it's active right now. When he first opened, it was an asphalt or concrete track, and this was it when it was the first week it was open, and it had the transponder system, so the computer would count laps and times, and this was just a fun track. And on its first day, we lined up all the cars that showed up for the race, and because it was Little Indy, and Indy usually starts in 3 rows, so we lined them up in 3 rows to get a few pictures of the guys, and there were some that came in after this. I think this is about 41 cars here in these pictures. And as far as getting the cars set up for this particular track, it took us about 5 weeks before we could get the dial it in on the asphalt, get it dialed in, and before we hit Victory Circle, I think it was about 5 weeks, and but we had a lot of fun. A lot of fun. After Bobby had been running about 6 months, he resurfaced the track because everybody wanted dirt, 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 dirt. So he packed down, as you can see here, some good old red clay, and we went racing again. And this is where it really took off. Here's a picture of Alan Foy, one of our Great Escapes drivers, and the guy that drove for me. And like I said, Great Escape was gracious enough to pay for a decent amount of the stuff and gave me a discount on some of the other parts that I supplied. In the Monte Carlo class, as you can see, some of the guys did the old school paint jobs just as I did with a 43 car. Some really cool stuff out there. I don't think I have a picture of the Darrell Waltrip, the Bud, or a lot of those, but this is actually the garage area, and I'll show you the pit area in a minute. Bobby had a beautiful setup there at Little Indy Speedway. Some of the other guys in the garage area. Great looking cars too, as you can easily see. And of course, this is our pit area. I painted the wall behind us petty blue, as well as our garage area there. And for the couple of classes, the other cars are down on the lower shelves, but you see a couple of the cars there in the Sportsman and the Super late model class. And some of our cars. Right before the mains, after I had everything set up, I always threw a towel over it, and people kept asking me, "Where are you hiding?" And I just was having fun. I wasn't hiding anything. But we did. We had a lot of fun. And on championship weekend in both classes, we ran the white with the petty blue number cars. And I guess you noticed on the front of these things, you see the Dodge nose and the Ram on the front. And end of the day, we were runner-up in the Sportsman class for the championship. And they ran a summer and winter points season. We were runner-up in the, I think we won the championship in the super modified class, or the wide open class, so to speak. I don't remember exactly what Bobby called it. And we were runner-up in the Sportsman. Now that's the garage area, and then you get out into the pit area. You see the stools down through there. The guys that are going to be your pit guys are sitting at. That was our pit about midway. And you see the white line on the racetrack. When you came over, your driver just pulled the car right up to you. And the significance of that was you could get about 100 plus laps sometimes out of a battery. But if you were running the 200 or 300, or 500 lap race, you had to, it was mandatory. You did, on a 200 lapper, you had to do a mandatory 2-tire change. And on the 500s, you had to do a mandatory 4-tire change. And you're going to have to change batteries at least 3 or 4 times during the race. So if your driver let you know that battery, that's all he had to yell, then he would pull up. You'd have a battery in your hand ready to snap back in and get him back on his way real quick. And if you'll notice right here, if you look closely, just behind the car, you see that orange-handled cordless drill. Well, for the 500, I brought that so I could get those tires on and off really quick where everybody else is using a wrench. And that's what gave us the win there. But both of our cars we did that with in the 500. And we finished first and second in the 200. And after I finished painting the cars, there's Dennis's favorite 43 and Alan's 36 car. Same paint scheme, just different colors. and they were fluorescent colors. Dennis went out in the 43 and took the pole position for the 200. And there's the car getting ready to get on the track. As the pole sitter or winner, you get to choose inside or outside lane on these. And this was coming up to the main. And Dennis always loved to start on the outside. He just got a better jump for some reason. So Alan started on the inside. And there's some action pictures of the race in action. And this one, I always like this. Alan was coming down into the first turn and run right up underneath somebody. So he truly one of those bump drafters. And at the end of the day, we ended up first and second. Dennis won the pole and Alan won the race, and Dennis was second. So we had a good day. And then the very next week, Dennis in the super class won the main. And when the Monte Carlos first came out, right when we were starting that class, I was going to run it, so I was going to run the 44 car. But I decided to run something else in the rookie class while I was learning to drive these things. So switched it over to the 43, and we're going to be taking a look at that car here in just a few minutes. It ultimately had the same stuff as the Supers. It just handled a little bit different because of the body. And you would think in RC cars that might not be the case. The 48 car there was one of the other guys that had brought that by the hobby shop to show it off. But he did a great job on the paint job. And this one was one of those sprint cars that I took and made a Cotton Owens, Spartanburg Automotive, Cotton Owens, one of his early dirt cars from way back early in his career. I saw some pictures of that, and I just wanted to do one of those coupes. And then we get to my rookie car. You guys know that I was privileged to pit and work with Butch Lindley, and let me tell you, what a guy. And I wanted my rookie car to honor him. So this was what I ran in the rookie class in the Monte Carlo, as well as my dirt late model, which was a Cadillac. I figured if I'm going to run, and while I'm learning, I may as well have some fun. So I got the decals from McAllister for a Cadillac. So I was running a Cadillac in the rookie class. And let me tell you, in the rookie class, the first 2 weeks I was getting used to getting it adjusted and the remote and all that stuff as far as running in a crowd like that. And after I kind of got used to it, I had a string of 5 in a row second places in the main event. I led in several of those races a few times, but I finished 5 straight weeks second place. And that 6th week, I really felt like I had it because I'd been over practicing, and I was turning some really good times. And from lap 4 in a 50 lap main, I led every lap except for those first 4 laps, going up to, I think it was lap 42 or 43. The right rear shock came loose from the shock tower and dropped down. And when it did, my handling went everywhere. It spun around, and when I got to the end of the next straightaway, it spun around again. But I had such a lead that it took a lap and a half before anybody could catch up to me. Because I was still turning pretty good turns or pretty good times on the straightaways. I just couldn't handle through the turns at all with that right rear busted shock or down shock. So when the race ended, I had finished 5th. And I'm like, so. But you know what? I had a blast anyway. The next week I went back, and Dennis had a misfortune in the super class, and my chassis had all the top-notch stuff in it, and he had busted up a bad part of the car, and it wasn't anything we were going to be able to fix real quick. So we converted a lot of his super stuff and the setup and everything straight off of his car onto my chassis. So I did not get to run. And with the expense of these cars, I did not buy another car. I just kind of dropped out of the rookie division there for a while and let them run. But I have to admit, this was so much fun, even as a car owner. And I'd mentioned Great Escape displayed the bodies that helped them sell them, and there's some of the bodies that were on display in the hobby shop there. That's a picture of Dennis with the car in our garage area. And Little Indy was just a lot of fun. As you can see, I was there, whether I was racing or not, or as a car owner, I was there about every week. And here's the guy setting up for a qualifying run. And by the way, when you qualified, you either ran 8 or 10 cars. It just depended. And some other good action shots. I've got some video too. Maybe I'll share those with you sometime. In the Monte Carlo class, Dennis had a lot of success too. And later, after Dennis relocated, Alan continued to drive the 36, and then Brooks Lauder took over, and he turned out to be a good wheelman for me too. And I filled in every now and then, and I was pretty consistently a top 3 car. And speaking of when I filled in, there's one of the Monte Carlo class what I'm running. Can you believe I'm passing Dale Earnhardt? And this I wanted to throw in just as a fun little memory here. Here's the sprint car class. And these things, they were just, because of the short wheelbase, these things were just terribly hard to handle, everybody said. And after about 2 months, Bobby just did away with that class because they were just constantly flipping and tumbling and all that stuff, but they were fun to watch. But this particular picture is of one of the cars that had led, I think this was I think it was a 50-lap main, and he had led pretty much the whole race, and with about 4 laps to go, he got tangled up in something and it broke. You can even see the center hub of the wheel still on the axle on the left side there. And he decided just to leave it out there. Well, for the next 4 laps, he held the lead on 3 tires and won the race, which I thought was cool. I told him, I said, would you set that out there? Let me just take a picture of it. Hard to believe, but he won on three wheels. Another class that was fun to watch was the kids. If you see up on the driver's stand there, all the kids that are getting ready to race there. And let me tell you, after they raced for a few weeks, these kids were pretty good. But getting back over to the expense of the hobby, guys, this is just one of 2 toolboxes and a big tray that I always took to the track every week, in addition to 3 cars. And you could spend a lot of money if you wanted to be competitive, and you just about had to. Here you see a dirt tire, a brand new one on the right, and one that is a week's worth of racing, maybe 2 weeks worth of racing on the left. And you see how the wear goes down on it. But once you set them up a certain way, there's nothing you can do about that. You're just going to wear them down. And a set of tires, you have to get one every week, every 2 weeks. You can spend some money on these things. Springs, depending on the track, the banking. With the real cars, I worked with the suspension, so there's the importance in when you're running coilover shocks, you got to have the right weight of shock oil in them. You got to have the right spring rate, and of course these springs, this tray, and this is for all 3 cars. You've got different colors. You've got different markings on them for the different weight of the springs, and that sets up your suspension, and you can get some money tied up in these things. You also have to have the right gearing, so you have the pinion gears down here in both plastic and metal with different teeth. Sometimes just one tooth would give you that little bitty edge over your competitors. You just had to kind of experiment with it. And that and the main gears, you had multiples in there too. And again, to stay competitive, you had to spend the money. This is a set of stock front and rear, soft, medium, and firm springs. And you also had about 3 companies that made them, or that still make them, in other spring rates. And as you could see in the tray back there, I had a lot of them. Always keep extra everything. Engines. This is a Spectrum 2.4 SR300 receiver. Probably one of the best receiver and radio systems I ever ran and we ever ran, because it had just such an immediate response. But cool stuff. And then here is your shock oils. Actually, I had about 6 or 7 different bottles of shock oils, different weights, but these were the primary ones that we discovered worked best at both racetracks. And let's go ahead and get over to one of the cars and I'll break it down, let you take a look. Well, starting off, let's take a look at the body as we look over one of these things. The bodies all come as clear Lexan, and it doesn't matter whether it's a monster truck, whatever it is, they all come with the Lexan clear body, and they come with the masks. Most of them do anyway, come with the masks that you put on the inside. By the way, these are painted totally reverse. All of your paint work is done on the inside, and I always backed it up with silver, and I'll get into why later, but they came with the masks for the windows, so you can put those in there. Some guys just painted it all whatever color, but I always masked it off. And you'll notice on all, if you'll go back and look at the pictures, you'll notice in all of them there's a hole in the windshield down on the lower driver's side. Weight distribution when it comes to handling of a race car is very important. So that little extra weight that is the transponder. So every time you cross the start-finish line, there's a line buried in the racetrack, and it clicks on the number of your transponder, and those are issued at the racetrack. When you get there, you're issued a transponder. You clip it in here, and that's when you make your time trials. You can check your times during practice and set up, and as well as the race. And of course, it counts the laps during the race. So you want to make sure you've got the transponder there. But the reason it's down here is for that weight distribution in the lower left side there. These are offset chassis. Now, the Lexan body, I'm getting away from it. Sorry about that. These things, because they're Lexan, they're very flexible. These things can get, and this is a really old body, but you can see here how these things just, you can get clobbered and they bounce right back. No big deal. But let's get the body off and take a look inside and get our hood pins out here. And again, these bodies can just twist up and bounce right back. This one you can see I've reinforced with some tape here and here. And then there you see the silver. That way you don't have any bleed through color-wise. And I always added a little of this masking tape on the inside too. And that way, any rubbing areas of like the shock tower here, you can see on the front shock tower where that would touch that. Well, that would wear a hole in the paint if you didn't have something there to kind of cushion that a little bit, because you do want this thing sitting as low to the ground as you possibly can. But looking at the chassis now, this is a hopped up version. I've got the carbon fiber chassis pan, the front suspension. I went with the aluminum A-arms on that. The rear usually didn't take that big a battering. I've got some aluminum. Totally left my head here. These things. But anyway, and I don't have an engine in this one. This had the brushless, the high performance in it. You see the different, we talked about the springs earlier. You see the different springs and shocks there. And these are oil filled coilover. You've got different spring rates, different shock oil weights in there. And you see on the shocks here, you got two different springs there. You got the blue back here and then the white on this side. But to set up, you count just like you would on a NASCAR with the jack screws when you're counting the revolutions that you're cranking your wedge up and down. Same thing here. You see the threads, and then this right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I just tightened that up more, so we'll back that back off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And a lot of times, some of the guys would put a mark on this, and that's the way they would set them up. And there's your main gear, and then you've got your pinion gear that goes on the engine itself. This is your receiver, so your radio control. There's your servo that controls your steering. And, well, there we go. So these things, as far as the setup goes, the weight distribution on the shocks, it is all adjustable there. And you notice your battery pack would sit in here, your LiPo would sit in here, and that had that weight on, again, the left side. It really helped in the handling. That's a little extra bar back there just to keep it from going too much further back. And then, of course, your hood pin posts. But it's pretty simple, but the stock kit had a plastic chassis plate, which had occasionally would break off right here. Usually, if you had a hard enough head-on collision, this little piece here, now I don't remember the name of it, this had a bad habit of breaking too. Bulkhead, the forward bulkhead. So I replaced that when I did the carbon fiber. I went ahead and did the forward bulkhead in aluminum along with the front A-arms and then the aluminum shocks. And when you're setting these things up, a lot of it is, you know, some of the guys that have been running at the track for a while, you can talk to them and they'll tell you what to do. But for the most part, it's just one of those trial and error things. Get out there, practice, and then make your adjustments to your suspension, and go have some fun. But that is the low C late model in 18th scale. And like I said, the sprint car I modified to make the Cotton Owens car, but never really raced it. And just a cool little, as simplistic as it looks, the complexity came in, and it really wasn't that hard once you knew what you were doing to adjust the suspension. That was the big thing, and just get used to your spring rates and your shock oils and all that stuff. Well, stick around a second, and I'll show you another one that's an asphalt car that didn't fare so well, but let me explain it to you. This asphalt car was one. It was more of an experiment, and this thing was faster than any car I've ever owned, and still is. This is a brushless system that the chassis, it's a Traxxas chassis that came out of the box claiming 60 plus miles an hour, and or excuse me, 65 plus miles an hour, and it'll do it easy. In fact, I think with the gearing and the setup, it did more. But you can see the Thunderbird body I've got on it is really, look at the rake on this thing. This is one bad little car. In competition, it never did better than, I think, second and third a few times. I just couldn't get it dialed in. This one was, for me personally, was a little more difficult, even though the suspension is laying down, if you'll see here, more like some of the European F1 cars. You see how the shocks, well, let me see if I can do it this way. So instead of the shocks being up, you've got the arms here and in the rear. And the thing to get used to with this is when you would do this on this one, the way it's laid out, it automatically changed the pressure over here. So with all of the experimentation and the shock oils and springs and spring rates, and you can see how these also turn. You adjust those, they're threaded, and you can adjust those spring rates around too. And this is, like I said, probably the fastest car I own. And this thing it is unbelievable fast-wise. But I just couldn't get it dialed in. So this is not one that ever saw the victory lane, but it was close a few times, but you know what? It's okay. It's okay. As long as we're having fun, that's what it was all about, and I definitely was having fun. These Traxxas, I tell you what, if you wanted to get one of these things and just to run around and get your body like I did with this this Thunderbird body. I mean, it's a bad looking little car, and like I said, it was lightning fast, but it was it was a handful for sure, but a great car. Well, guys, that was a visit with some of my other hobbies, or my other hobby, the automotively anyway. This was a fun thing, and I kind of hated that it died out and things changed. I am glad to get back to models, and like I said, if you want to complain about the price of model cars, get into this. A set of tires, it's kind of like real racing. A set of tires every week, even on the dirt tracks, you'll wear those things out. It can get pricey, and by the time you get all the different pinion gears for the different racetracks and gearing, and it's just amazing how much you can spend in these things, because it'll get away from you. But guys, thanks for tagging along. This brought back some great memories for me to share these. A great hobby, and hey, we all have to have several sometimes. But model cars, building model cars, probably the oldest and longest I've been doing anything, and probably get the most satisfaction out of it, even over this, as fun as it was. Well, guys, thanks for tagging along again. I've said that I don't know how many times, but thank you. I do appreciate it. Jason, Henry, thank y'all for sharing some of your hobbies. I appreciate that very much, and that motivating me to do this. Guys, thanks again, and if you're not a subscriber, head over, hit that sub button, give us a like. We'd appreciate it very much. It helps out the channel, it helps out the community. So guys, until next time, God bless, and we will see you in the next video.